What's up, guys? Welcome to Flex Friday this week. We're here on week 12. I'm going to start something new on the show here. I'm going to start every episode with a really deep quote from one of my favorite philosophers, Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, what was it? When the horse comes to the water, you feed him the hay. It was something, man. The horse and the Lord, but we love Jameis. If you guys haven't been to the channel before, we're going to give you some flex players to win your league. I'm here with Andy, and he's going to get us kicked off with his first player of the week.
Right on. We're going to start off with Rome Odunze, who was targeted 10 times, which is the most out of any of the Chicago wide receivers in the first week with their new offensive coordinator. They get to take on the Vikings this week, which are allowing the fifth most points to wide receivers on the season, and Vikings playing their third consecutive road game. A lot of the top wide receivers versus the Vikings have been either twos or threes. I mean, we had Westbrook-Ikhine go for 117. Debo was the leading receiver on the Niners when Ayuk was healthy. Diggs had more yards than Nico when they played the Texans. So I like the other Bears wide receivers as well this week. I think DJ Moore is always a pretty safe option in a matchup like this. But I think this is just in particular a great matchup for Odunze, and I can see him having a big game here.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings it's an interesting matchup because, they are one of the league's better defenses, but you have been seemed able to throw on them, whether it's due to game script or just kind of the way they play, I think. They're letting wide receivers get some points, but like you said, I mean, I think Odunze may come on a little hotter down the stretch. Offensive coordinator change, a couple weeks removed from the bye. All of those things tend to be positives for a rookie wide receiver. So moving into my first pick, a rookie wide receiver from last year who we all thought was a bust, but might actually be okay this season. And that's going to be Quentin Johnston of the Chargers in a awesome matchup we're going to get Monday night, Baltimore and the Chargers. But besides the stretch of games where Johnston was off the field, he's been pretty awesome this year, honestly, at least for whatever your expectation was. We all know Baltimore is basically a top 5 matchup for wide receivers this season. They've been letting you get a lot of points from the wide receiver position, whether it's because they're blowing you out or they're blowing some coverages against guys like Jamar Chase, etc. But I'd expect another high-flying game from the Chargers going up against Baltimore. Baltimore coming off the loss. Now the Steelers lost, so the division's back within their grasp. I think Baltimore's going to come out and want to score some points. And Chargers are going to have to keep up. So play Herbert, play McConkey, play Quentin Johnston this week. I really like it again for the Chargers offense.
Yeah, I agree there. Like you said, I mean, totally left for dead to now pretty much the go-to wide receiver 2 on this offense. He scored a touchdown in each of his last 3 games. So they definitely like trying to utilize him in the red zone. They like trying to utilize him downfield. The Ravens, not only are they just top 5 or bottom 5 against wide receivers in passing, they've allowed the most yards and the most touchdowns to the position. So I think this is probably the best matchup for your wide receivers in the NFL. Herb is throwing it and playing in this Harbaugh Bowl. It's going to be a great Monday night game. And I think, like you said, all these Chargers pass catchers are going to have an opportunity.
So Andy's coming in with a running back. He's going with Austin Ekeler, going up against maybe the worst team in the NFL at this point. The all-in Dallas Cowboys from this offseason, all in on the number 1 pick maybe. But Andy, why Austin Ekeler this year?
Yeah, I mean, the muscly 29-year-old only had 2 carries last week when Brian Robinson returned. Doesn't sound great, but then you look at the other side and 8 catches on 9 targets, which is phenomenal. The Commanders coming off a little bit of a longer rest after that Thursday night game, which you always love for your elder statesman at the running back position. And, playing the Cowboys, they have allowed the most yards per reception to the running back out of any team in the NFL. They're 32nd DVOA versus the pass for running backs. And so this is, a great bounce back spot for them. And, the Commanders are still in a struggle to fight for the lead in this division, only a game behind the Eagles. And that was a close game that we saw with Brian Robinson back up until the 4th quarter. And Ekeler was in for a little over 50% of the snaps. So, even in this game, if they get a big lead, he's still probably going to get at least 40% of the snaps. And the way that they use him in the receiving game is what I really love here. Just how bad specifically Dallas is, one, against running backs, but especially pass catching running backs. I think he's got a pretty high floor. And if you're playing in a PPR league, I think he's a smash start this week.
Yeah, I mean, Ekeler, like, yes, he may not be the top 5 running back from a couple years ago, but he looks pretty good. Like he makes guys miss, he breaks tackles. He's always been a good pass catcher, and so they're using him in a way that is right in his skill set and just like right at exactly what he wants to do for your offense. And just like you said, he's kind of getting the targets because this Washington team, like, they have Terry McLaurin, but other than that, like, their other pass catchers, like, no one really scares you. I mean, what, like 39-year-old Zach Ertz? I don't like.
It was a pretty nice catch you made at the end of that.
Yeah, Noah Brown, Zacchaeus, like, that, like, Eckler's one of their weapons coming out of the backfield, and you can tell they have plays specifically diagrammed to get the ball into Eckler's hands. I mean, he's on their kickoff unit, for Pete's sake, man. Like, they obviously want to get this guy the ball in space and let him try to make a play. So, moving on to my next guy. This has been a tough one all year, man. I still think this guy has all the talent in the world. I really just think it didn't break for him this year, and that's going to be Jaylen Waddle. Miami's been decent these past couple of weeks since Tua's come back. They don't really look like the high-flying Miami team we expected at the beginning of the year. They've been winning some games. They still need to win. They're in the playoff hunt, and this is a great matchup for Jaylen Waddle specifically. Patriots very good against wide receiver ones, but very bad against wide receiver twos. Basically just comes down to Christian Gonzalez, man. He is a shutdown corner for the Patriots, and I would have to imagine he's going to be on Tyreek Hill. I don't see the future. I can't guarantee that, but Tyreek Hill is the wide receiver one, so I think Waddle's going to get some one-on-one opportunities and maybe look for him to have a nice get back, get right game for Jaylen Waddle's standard this season, I think.
Yeah, we've only had one end zone penguin walk this season, which is really a bummer because it's probably my favorite celebration in the NFL. Patriots, 6th most yards to wide receivers and 28th DVOA versus wide receiver twos. Jonnu Smith having this amazing year, only 5 receptions shy of Tyreek Hill. But, if the Dolphins want to keep going, I mean, it makes sense for them to try and get the ball to their best playmakers. Like you said, Jaylen Waddle, still a very talented receiver, just kind of some weird stuff going on down in Miami. But this is a great matchup for him. And though it hasn't really worked yet, it just might work now.
So sticking with a Florida team, Andy's getting another rookie who's kind of been a little banged up, but still has a chance to have a big role in the offense. Jalen McMillan for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Looks like Mike Evans is going to be back, but obviously still no Chris Godwin, who's out for the year. So Andy, what about Jalen McMillan this week do you think gives him a chance to kind of earn a role and maybe finish the season off, I think?
Yeah, so I like Evans coming back in this game for McMillan. Evans is definitely going to be able to get his, but he's also going to be drawing a lot more of the coverage. And playing the Giants this week, the Giants have actually been fairly decent about trying to contain those wide receiver ones. About half the games that they've played, it's been a wide receiver 2 or a 3, kind of like the Vikings. That has been the leading guy. I mean, the leading receivers against the Giants have been, let's see, did I write it down here? Nope, didn't put it down, but it's, half their games, it's been, guys that you wouldn't really expect. Like Noah Brown, when they played the Commanders twice, was the leading receiver in both games. So I like him to be able to get some of those easier looks. Baker's obviously just going to be slinging it like he does that thing. And Giants are the worst DVOA versus the deep ball. So, Jalen McMillan, they can take shots with them. They can run them underneath. So definitely still like Evans to be able to get his targets, but I like McMillan here too.
So moving on to my last player for the week, we're going with another wide receiver, a wide receiver on the Packers, and that's going to be Christian Watson. For a lot of these flex videos, I don't know exactly for Andy, but I think he's pretty similar, is we really like looking and exploiting wide receiver 2 matchups because in general, you're playing your wide receiver ones on any given team. So I don't really think we are giving you any new or inciting information by saying, hey, play your wide receiver ones. But Christian Watson going up against the Niners, who have been giving up some points to wide receiver twos on opposing offenses. I think a lot of times it just comes down when you have a good cornerback, then you tend to target the other side of the field a little more. And the Niners, Lenore, just got that new contract. He's a very good player. And so teams have been kind of attacking them in a different way. But Christian Watson has the upside. He has zero floor, but I'm willing to take a risk in a not must-win game for the Packers, but an important game, man. I mean, they're playing the Niners. No one takes those games lightly when you are in the top tier of the NFC games, especially in the playoff race right now.
Yeah, and I think especially for Packers getting up, I mean, this is a team that has beat the Packers in the playoffs. I think it's like 5 of the last 10 or 12 years, including last year in the playoffs. A lot of the guys on the Packers now weren't around for all of the Rodgers defeats at the hands of the Niners, but everybody pretty much was here for last year. So I know the team sounds really fired up about this. Watson increasing his target share. He's averaging over 5.5 targets a game the last 3 contests, which for him is pretty good, especially because so many of his targets are deeper downfield, where, according to DVOA, San Fran has been pretty good defending the outside balls, but pretty weak over the middle, especially the deep middle. They love running Watson on post routes. They love him on those 15-yard digs. So I think there's some opportunity for him to exploit it there. And I mean, it makes sense getting him the ball. He's been healthy pretty much the whole season besides a little ankle. And he is by far the fastest, most explosive guy on this team. If you can get him the ball and he gets a little bit of separation, then he can be gone. So, I mean, I'm playing you in one of our dynasty leagues and I've got Watson and Dobbs and I'm sitting there and right now I've got Watson in my lineup. So I hope you're right, man.
Yeah, it really is probably the toughest offense besides Josh Jacobs to pick who to play on any given week. And it's just because they're a good NFL offense, which can be a little tricky for fantasy sometimes, but you got to be willing to take your stab. So moving on to our part of the show where we go over our picks from last week, week 11. Going to put that up on the screen. Feel free to pause it if you want to take a peek. Andy had Mike Williams, Travis Etienne, Cedric Tillman, Jameis Winston, and Will Dissly. He went 2 for 5. He's sitting at exactly 50% on the year. I had Nick Chubb 1 week too early. Then Ladd McConkey, Jameis Williams, Herbert, Dawson Knox. I got 3 out of 4 last week. I'm looking at 80% on the season. So moving into our streamers for this week, Andy with the honorary Blake Bortles play of the week, basically a QB who could put up some big points in trash time this week. Anthony Richardson going up against the Detroit Lions. Do the Colts have a chance with this offense, or do you just think they're going to be throwing? He's going to be scoring. And fantasy football isn't the NFL, man. It's all about just putting up stats.
Yeah. And, he's available in 55% of leagues because, definitely has not lived up to the hype that he was drafted as. I don't know really if the Colts have a chance to win, but they have been kind of scrappy and hanging around in these games. But the Lions have just been steamrolling teams by insane amounts. So, we'll see what happens. But what I do like is that the Lions have 3 Anzalone and 2 of their other linebackers are on injured reserve, plus some other injuries in the secondary. So this defense is a little bit banged up. And, they've been pretty decent against quarterbacks, but they have a little bit of a weakness, I think, against running quarterbacks. Really, the only guy they've played this year has been Kyler, who ran for 50 against them. And last year doing Flex Friday, Justin Fields was in consideration or was one of our nominees whenever he played the Lions because he would have career games running the ball against him. His worst being 54 yards and a touchdown, his best being 134 and 2 touchdowns. So if Richardson can, bring that boom and run it like he can, I think he can have a pretty productive fantasy day, even if the Colts, wind up losing 17-49 or something. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to last week, I had the choice to pick up Richardson in a league. I went kind of more risk averse and went in a different direction. But, he proved us wrong. He had a very good week last week. I did hit on some of his rushing props, but I think he took the break and they're probably just going to run him more, man. They have to lean into his strength because here's the thing. He may get hurt, but he is not a good enough passer yet to just sit back there and throw the ball 40 times and win the Colts game. So I think they're going to run. He's obviously a threat to score every time they get in the red zone. And kind of in this game, in either sense, it's like, yeah, you might throw a pick, but then they're going to fall behind and he's going to have to throw. So I think he's going to put up some maybe ugly NFL numbers, but I think I could see him scoring some points fantasy wise, just because, this game against the Lions is you got to score. So you go for it on fourth down instead of kicking the field goal. You do these kind of things that can lead to the kind of ceiling you want. So from maybe one of the most exciting and super high draft pick guys, I'm going the bottom of the barrel. We are going Tommy DeVito. He is coming in at QB for the Giants, and I just couldn't help myself. The Bucs are actually a pretty good matchup for quarterbacks. They're definitely within the what I like to call the green zone on Sleeper or whatever, right? Top third of good matchups. So I like Tommy DeVito if you're looking really, really desperate in a super flex league or a league where everyone's rostering two quarterbacks and you're staring at Gardner Minshew and Will Levis and Tommy DeVito. I'm rolling with Tommy DeVito this week, hoping he can just get a little of that magic from last year.
He's Tommy DeVito back at the number one, the QB. Hey, let's go. Like you said, playing the Bucs, it's a great matchup. They've allowed the fourth most passing yards, fifth most passing touchdowns, and tied for the third most rushing touchdowns by the quarterback. DeVito, playing last year, he had some okay games. Definitely has better weapons to throw to this year, adding Neighbors, and he's not afraid to run. In his 5 games as a starter, 3 of those, he went over 35 rush yards. And in one of those games, he ran for 71 against my Packers. And he's on waivers in 92% of leagues. So if you need somebody this week with the buys, you forgot when waivers are going through, he's got a phenomenal matchup. And can make it done. I think you got worse choices to be your starting quarterback this week.
Sometimes you got to get desperate. And whether this is a dynasty league pickup where you have no other options because Burrow's on bye and you're rolling with DeVito, I just think you could do worse than him this week. Moving into our tight end streamers, Andy going with, his third rookie of the week, but Ja'Tavion Sanders getting a tasty little matchup against the Chiefs. Fantasy-wise, I don't think anyone's picking the Panthers to win this game, but Sanders has been more involved in the offense this past month, I would say, for the Panthers. So what about this matchup intrigues you, Andy?
Yeah, you had the deep play at quarterback. I'm going the deep play at tight end. He's available or only rostered in 11% of leagues. And one of the best matchups versus the Chiefs. They've allowed the most yards to the position, 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. And Sanders' snap share in the last 2 contests has been 85% or more, which is awesome. As a rookie tight end coming in, definitely expect him to start slow unless you're a guy like Brock Bowers or Sam Laporta. That has definitely been the case here, but now he's getting his opportunities. Sneakily, he's been a top 10 guy the last 2 weeks with that snap share. And here you get a phenomenal matchup. He's not my favorite guy if you've got a better tight end at the position, but if you need somebody on waivers, you got a guy on a buy, whatever's going on, I think you could do a lot worse than Ja'Tavion Sanders.
Yeah, the Panthers are at this part in the season, and a lot of teams get to this where once you're out of the playoff hunt, man, you got to see what you have on the roster. And so they're giving these young guys a chance to see what they can do. And Sanders wasn't like a highly, highly drafted guy, but he was a very elite talent in college. And I think a lot of people in the dynasty community specifically had high hopes for him. And I think he's showing that he's a starting tight end in the NFL. So I'm with you, man. I almost threw him on this list. I think it was a couple weeks ago. I ended up going in a different direction, but he's been trending towards being a streamable tight end, I think, in fantasy, where if you have to play him, you're not going to be super disappointed. And moving into the last guy of the week, our boy from last week that Andy hit on, and I just couldn't help myself from running it back. But big Will Dissly, man, he scored in the first quarter down the seam last week for Justin Herbert. And like we talked about targeting these Chargers weapons this week against Baltimore, I'm sticking with it with Dissly, man. I think this Chargers offense is kind of humming a little bit with Herbert under the helm. They're letting him kind of let loose a little bit, which has been big for their offensive weapons. And Dissly has been involved. He's not a fancy or flashy tight end play, but he's being targeted by Justin Herbert, who's one of the top 5 throwers in the NFL. And, Disley is not going to be getting double teamed by any means. So I think he has a chance to make some plays and potentially have another pretty nice game for you as a tight end streamer this week.
Yeah, he's a real lunch pail, first in, last out kind of guy on the roster. Like you said, not super flashy, but can get it done. And he goes from playing the team allowing the third most yards to the tight end to the team allowing the second most yards to the tight end. So great matchup versus the Ravens. Ravens have been okay in the red zone against the tight ends, but I think a lot of that is just because they've been so generous at letting the wide receivers score touchdowns that it's tough. You can't score 2 touchdowns on the same drive. So when one of the wide receivers catches a touchdown, you can't also have the tight end catch it at the same time. But that doesn't mean that they're still not susceptible to it. So I think he's a great play. And like I said last week, his whole schedule the rest of the season is pretty phenomenal. So if you picked him up, even after this week, keep holding on to him because he could be a guy that you're going to find yourself starting a lot for the remainder of the season and potentially into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think tight end more than any other position, sometimes you just ride the hot hand. If you got a streamer that's doing well and you're like, you know what? I haven't been excited about enter the tight end I've been playing. I'm just sticking with Will Disley, man. He keeps having decent games. And, I always say my tiebreaker is he's playing Monday night. I will always maybe I just like the excitement.
Yeah.
But as long as I got players left on my roster, I got a chance to come back. So thank you guys for tuning in for week 12 of Flex Friday. We're trying to help you guys win your league. Feel free to hit us up with any questions. Check out any of the other videos on the channel. But Andy, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you guys next week, maybe adjusted due to Thanksgiving, but we will try our best to get something out for you guys, even if it's just some shorts maybe on who to start in your flex position for week 13. And make sure to check out Dallas and the Giants, man. Super stoked to watch my boy Tommy DeVito. Going to be betting on some props for sure next week, but we'll catch you guys